There is a particular kind of loneliness that has no name. It is not the loneliness of being alone in a room. It is the loneliness of being in a full room and still feeling invisible, of speaking and watching people's eyes go somewhere else, of trying to explain something deep inside you and seeing nothing register on the other person's face. You know that feeling, not because someone told you about it, because you have lived it. And if you stay with me until the very end of this, what you understand here may completely change how you see every single season you have ever walked through alone. There was a version of you, maybe years ago, maybe still right now, who stopped trying to explain yourself, not because you gave up, but because you got tired of watching people look at you like you were speaking a language they had never learned. You got tired of seeing confusion where you hoped for connection. You got tired of simplifying yourself just to fit inside someone else's understanding. So you went quiet, and the world looked at your silence and called it distance, called it pride, called it strange. They did not know that your silence was not withdrawal. It was protection. Think about that season, the one where no one quite understood what you were carrying. What did it feel like to move through the world holding something that no one else could see? Because here is what I want you to understand, and this is important. Misunderstanding is not the same as being wrong. You were not wrong. You were just early. And early always looks like confusion to the people watching from a distance. There is a man in the ancient scriptures whose name you have likely heard, David. Before the throne, before the victory, before anyone called him king, David was in a field, not a celebrated field, not a field anyone visited, a field where the sheep did not care about his potential, where the wind did not whisper anything encouraging, where the only sounds were the sounds of an ordinary day, stretching into an ordinary night. When the prophet Samuel came to anoint the next king of Israel, he went to the house of Jesse. He looked at son after son, strong sons, impressive sons, sons that looked the part, and David was not even called to the table. His own father forgot him. Let that land for a moment. The man who would become the most celebrated king in the history of his people was not considered worth calling. He was an afterthought in his own household, invisible to the very people who should have seen him first. This is not unfamiliar to you. The rooms where your name was not mentioned, the conversations where your absence was not noticed, the moments where the people closest to you looked right past what you were becoming. And yet, the field was not punishment. The field was formation. Something happens to a person when no one is watching, when there is no applause to perform for, no audience to adjust yourself to, no mirror held up by someone else's approval. You are forced, absolutely forced, to find out who you are from the inside. Most people in this world only know who they are because someone told them. Their identity is borrowed. Their confidence is rented. It lasts only as long as the validation keeps coming. But you were denied that shortcut. And so you had to build something that could not be taken away, because it was never given to you by someone else in the first place. You felt this before. This slow, painful, private kind of becoming. Psychologists call it identity formation under adversity. The process by which a self, a real, durable, unshakable self is built not through ease, but through the absence of it. When your environment does not reflect you back correctly, you are forced inward. And that inward journey, as painful as it is the most important journey a human being can take. Because everything built from the outside can be dismantled from the outside. But what you find in yourself, by yourself, through the silence and the misunderstanding, and the long, quiet seasons, that cannot be touched. David killed the lion and the bear in the field, alone, not because he was trying to prepare for Goliath. He did not know Goliath was coming. He was just being faithful in the place where no one could see him, doing the hard thing when there was no reward for doing it. And then one day, the giant appeared, and every soldier in the army of Israel stood frozen. Every experienced man, every decorated warrior, they had trained in front of people. They had built their courage where it could be witnessed. David walked out alone, because he had already faced the thing that could not be witnessed. In a field, in the dark, where no one saw, where no one clapped. The misunderstanding was not wasted time. It was his training ground. What did your season of being unseen force you to become? Not what it cost you, you already know that. But what did it build in you, quietly? without your permission, because I want to suggest something to you now. Something that might feel uncomfortable at first. The people who could not understand you were never supposed to, not because they were bad people, not because they failed you, but because what was growing in you was not yet meant for them to see. Premature exposure kills things that are still forming. A seed in the ground looks like nothing. It looks dead. It looks like it has failed to produce. But the darkness of the soil is not the seed's enemy. It is its sanctuary. Now I want to bring in another story, because this pattern, this divine, recurring pattern does not belong to David alone. Joseph had a dream so vivid, so certain, so burning inside of him, that he made the mistake of telling it too soon, to people who were not ready to hold it, to brothers who looked at his vision and saw a threat to their own. And so they took his coat, they threw him in a pit, they sold him into slavery, and they told their father he was dead. The dream did not die, though the dream went underground. Here is what strikes me about Joseph's story. He was not misunderstood once. He was misunderstood over and over and over again, by his brothers, by Potiphar's household, by the cupbearer who promised to remember him and then forgot. Every single time it looked like the misunderstanding was over, it started again, and every single time he was repositioned. What his brothers meant as destruction moved him to Egypt. What Potiphar's house meant as ruin placed him in prison. What the cupbearer's forgetfulness meant as delay held him there until the exact moment the Pharaoh needed an interpreter of dreams. The misunderstanding was not an obstacle to Joseph's purpose. It was the vehicle for it. Tell me in the comments what misunderstanding in your life actually moved you forward, even though it didn't feel that way at the time. Think about the person you know who always felt slightly out of frequency. Maybe that person is you. You probably already know it is. The one in every room who heard the conversation and thought something different, who laughed a second too late because you were still processing a deeper layer of what was said, who had ideas that people looked at blankly, who felt the texture of things more acutely than those around you. You learned to perform normalcy. You learned to compress yourself into whatever shape the room required. You became fluent in a language that was never quite your own, and it was exhausting, because you were not broken, you were not defective, you were not too much. You were just operating at a frequency that the people around you had not yet tuned to. This is not unfamiliar to you. The specific loneliness of being in a room full of people who love you and still feeling fundamentally unseen. The exhaustion of editing yourself before you speak. The grief, and it is grief of being known only partially. But here is the thing about frequency. The right signal always finds the right receiver. Eventually, not on your timeline, not in the way you imagined, but with a precision that, when you look back on it, will make you quietly amazed at how exact it all was. Something about this resonates deeply. I know it does. There is a psychological pattern called survival mode identity. It is what happens when a person, usually from a young age, experiences environments that cannot hold them fully. Environments that misread them, mislabel them, or simply do not have the capacity to see them clearly. The mind adapts. It always adapts. It builds a smaller, safer version of the self to present to the world. It learns which parts of you are acceptable and buries the rest. And for a while, that adaptation saves you. But eventually, and this is the moment many people are standing in right now, that adapted self becomes too small. The life built around other people's misunderstanding of you no longer fits, and something inside begins to press, to push, to refuse to stay buried any longer. What part of you has been buried under other people's misunderstanding? What is it that you stopped saying out loud? Because no one seemed to understand it the first few times you tried. Because I want you to hear this clearly. That part of you did not disappear. It waited. It is still waiting. Patient, undiminished, carrying the full weight of what you were always meant to be. And the season of being misunderstood was not burying it deeper. It was protecting it from exposure too early, from people who were not yet ready to receive it, from a world that would have consumed it before it was strong enough to withstand consumption. David did not leave the field bitter. He left carrying something no one could explain, a quality in his eyes that unnerved Saul even before Saul knew why, a stillness that soldiers twice his age did not possess, a certainty that came not from arrogance, but from something he had met in himself, alone, in a place where no one was watching, Joseph did not leave the prison destroyed. He left with an interpretive ability, a clarity, a wisdom that had been compressed and refined through every layer of misunderstanding he had passed through. Each betrayal had stripped away something that was not truly him. Each false accusation had burned off what was disposable. What remained was pure. What remained was unbreakable. You are not behind. I want to say that again, because I know the voice in your head, the one that compares your timeline to everyone else's. I know it has been loud lately. You are not behind. You are being built on a different schedule, a longer schedule, a more thorough schedule, because what is being prepared in you requires more time than what is being prepared in others. Not because you are lesser, because you are being trusted with something more, and the weight of that required a longer formation. The moment Joseph stood before Pharaoh, every single misunderstanding in his story snapped into place. The pit, the slavery, the prison, the forgotten promise. Every one of those things that looked, in the moment, like God had lost track of him, had been positioning him, inch by inch, season by season, betrayal by betrayal, not to a throne he had earned, but to a platform he had been formed for. There is a difference between earning a place and being formed for one. Earned things can be taken, but what you are formed into, you simply are. No one can take it from you, because it is not a position you hold. It is a person you have become, and this is the hidden truth that I want to leave inside you today. The season where nobody understood you was not a season of loss. It was a season of selection. The misunderstanding filtered out what was not yours. The silence removed the noise that would have distracted you. The isolation compressed you into something that the applause, had it come too early, would have scattered. You were not being abandoned in that season. You were being selected. Separated from the version of yourself that would have been shaped entirely by other people's expectations, separated from the life that would have been designed around other people's understanding of who you were, and moved quietly, painfully, precisely toward the life that only you can carry. There will come a moment, maybe it has already begun, when people who once looked past you look again, and what they see will confuse them, because the person standing there will not match the person they thought they knew, the one who was quiet, the one who seemed stuck, the one they had mentally filed away. What they will see instead is someone who has a groundedness they cannot quite explain, a clarity they find both attractive and unsettling, a confidence that does not perform itself because it does not need to, and they will try to understand where it came from, but they will not be able to, because it came from the field, it came from the pit, it came from the long, invisible seasons that they were never invited into. It came from the places where you became. You do not need to be understood to move forward. That is the transformation I want to invite you into right now, not someday, not when it all makes sense. Right now, in this moment, the need to be understood, the hunger for it, the ache of it that was a wound, a real wound, and I am not dismissing it. That wound deserved to be grieved, but you are not the wound anymore. You are what grew around it. You are what formed in the silence, what survived the misreading, what persisted through the invisibility, what kept pressing even when there was no one to press toward. That is not a small thing. That is the rarest kind of human being. David was anointed in a field, not in a palace, not in front of an army, not after a victory anyone could witness. He was anointed with oil running down his face, standing in the place where no one had thought to look for him. And the anointing did not wait for the applause. The anointing came first. The throne came after, years after, through betrayal and exile, and more misunderstanding than most of us will ever carry. But the anointing, the thing placed inside him, in the field, when no one was watching, that could not be undone, not by Saul's jealousy, not by the wilderness years, not by the people who called him a rebel and a fugitive, because it was not given by men, and it could not be revoked by men. What was placed inside you, in your field, is the same. It was not given by the approval of the people around you. It was not validated into existence by someone finally understanding you. It was placed before the platform, before the recognition, before any of this made sense. And because it was not given by the room, it cannot be taken by the room. The misunderstanding did not touch it. The misunderstanding was orbiting something it could not reach. I want you to think right now about the version of you that existed before the world started telling you who you were, before the comparisons, before the labels, before you learned to read the room, before you entered it, before you started translating yourself for other people's comfort. That version of you, the one that felt things deeply and was not yet ashamed of it, the one that had ideas before it knew to ask for permission, the one that moved with a kind of instinctive certainty before the uncertainty was taught to it. That person is not gone. That person is what the misunderstanding was protecting all along. The season is shifting. I do not say that lightly. I say it because I have watched this pattern too many times in too many stories, ancient and modern, to miss it. There is a moment in every long formation when the pressure changes, when something that has been internal begins to press outward, when the thing that was underground begins to break the surface, not because the person decided to force it, but because the formation completed itself. The seed does not decide to become a tree. It becomes one because the conditions inside it finally match the conditions around it. Something about this resonates in you right now, because you are standing at the edge of your own emergence. You do not need to announce it. You do not need to explain it to the people who missed it. You do not owe anyone a summary of the journey. You do not need to convince the people who misread you that they were wrong. What is being built in you will speak for itself. It already has started to. You can feel it, that slight shift in how you hold yourself. That moment where a comment that used to wound you just does not land the same way anymore. That growing sense that the need for their understanding is loosening. That is not indifference. That is arrival. Joseph, standing before Pharaoh, did not pause to address every person who had misunderstood him. He did not draft a speech about the pit. He did not bring receipts from the prison. He simply operated at the level he had been formed for, and the world reorganized itself around him. As it does, as it always does, when someone finally steps fully into what they were formed to carry, the environment has no choice but to respond, not because they demanded recognition, but because the weight of what they became cannot be ignored. The loneliness you carried was not a sign that you were meant to be alone. It was a sign that the connections you were being prepared for require a version of you that the loneliness was building. The people who are coming into your life, some of them are already arriving. They will not look at you and see someone who needs to be explained. They will look at you and simply know, the way David's men found him in the wilderness. Broken men, dismissed men, men who had been misread by a system that could not hold them. They found David, not the celebrated David, not the victorious David, the exiled David, and they recognized something. They did not need it explained to them. They just knew, your people will find you, not the people who tolerated a compressed version of you, not the ones who needed you smaller so they could feel comfortable, not the ones who called your depth too much, because their own depth had been sealed off. Your people, the ones who do not require translation, the ones who hear the first sentence and something in them leans forward, the ones who have been carrying a similar ache, a similar frequency, a similar sense of not quite belonging to the room they were in. They are being prepared too, and the same force that was forming you in the hidden season is drawing you toward each other in the right time, with the right precision. So here is what I want to leave you with, not as a conclusion, not as a summary, but as a truth that I want placed in your chest, where it can keep working after this video ends. The season where nobody understood you was not a detour. It was the road. The misunderstanding was not evidence that your purpose was wrong. It was evidence that your purpose was real. Real things are always met with resistance before they are met with recognition. Always. Without exception. You were not skipped. You were not forgotten. You were not left behind. You were chosen for a formation that required more time, more silence, more internal work than the people around you were asked to do. And that formation is not a burden. It is a distinction. David was anointed before the throne. Joseph was chosen before the palace. And you in your field, in your pit, in your long and quiet season of being unseen, you were being prepared before the moment that is still coming. The misunderstanding did not cancel your purpose. It confirmed it. Because purpose does not need to be understood by everyone to be real. It only needs to be carried. And you have been carrying it through everything, without setting it down. That is not a small thing. That is everything. I am being seen. If something in this reached you today, if it named something you have been carrying but could not quite put into words, type that declaration in the comments. Not for the algorithm, for yourself, as a marker, as a stake in the ground that says, I know what season I have been in, and I know what it has been building. Because you are not behind. You are not broken. You are not too late. You are precisely on time for something that only you can carry, and the world is about to find out.